Coming up, the Red Sox are dead, and Bailey Zappe's career might be as well. We're going to talk Bruins and this Jeremy Swayman fiasco with Matt Barry of the Bruins Benders podcast, and why today might just be the greatest day of my life. All that and more coming up on The Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. You saw the title. It is The Cam Show. It is Rogue Media Sports Network coming at you from the Colt Brennan Memorial Studios in Waco, Texas. I am your host, Cam Stewart, and my beloved Red Sox, your beloved Red Sox, our hometown nine, may they rest in peace. This season is done. It's frustrating how it has gone, although not completely surprising or shocking. But, yeah, they're just 3 games over 500 with, just about a month left in the season and might well just be out of this wild card race entirely. Fangraphs has them at just a 14% chance to make the playoffs, which still seems high to me, to be totally honest with you, for a team that has lost 5 straight games and was swept by the Diamondbacks over the weekend and lost 2 on Monday to the Blue Jays, who are one of the teams in this league that's actually worse, or in this division that's actually worse than the Red Sox. They're 3 games under 500. And it looks dead in the water. I mean, you look at the wild card standings, and it's not terrible in that they're 5 games back, but Minnesota has a much easier schedule the rest of the way. They feel like they have a commanding lead over this Red Sox team. So the good news for the Red Sox is Seattle has faded big time. They just fired their manager, but it looks like it's done. And the real loser in all of this at the first time of asking is Craig Breslow. I defended Craig Breslow on trade deadline day. I thought Felger was an idiot for saying he's not a baseball guy. A guy played over 10 years in the major leagues. He gets a pension from Major League Baseball, but he's not a baseball guy. I still think that's stupid. But I thought Breslow's going to hit on one of these 2 guys, one of these 2 relief pitchers. And I was way wrong. They're both fucking awful. They're both terrible. Lucas Sims, Luis Garcia just give you absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing positive. They do give you something. They get lit up every time they're out there. All the memes of the dog pissing all over the kitchen floor, like that is every time Luis Garcia and Lucas Sims go out there in any kind of situation for the Red Sox. And I was on this show saying at the end of July, look, you just need one of two of them to be good. You're going to get your other high leverage guys back here pretty soon. You need to, kind of stop the bleeding until then. And I was wrong on both fronts. Neither of the guys were good, and you haven't gotten your guys back. I know Slayton threw some the other day. You need the Slayton, Martin, Winkowski. You needed that, which sounds pretty pathetic to say, but you needed that to get to Jansen, and no longer the case. I just don't think – I think it's going to be too little too late. I don't think you're going to get these guys back in time. Again, the Red Sox still have one of the toughest schedules in baseball. They had arguably the toughest coming out of the All-Star break. It's still pretty difficult when you look at these next few weeks for them. It's not going to be a cakewalk for this team to just get right back in this thing. You just had you're finishing up with Toronto, which should be an easy series. 5 games with Toronto at home, and you're already down 0-2. You got to win the rest just to take the series. That's pathetic right there. At Detroit, at the Mets, Detroit still thinks they've got something of a chance in the wild card, so that becomes a big series. And then Chicago at home, but then after that, you're basically all division the rest of the way in September after Labor Day, with one other series mixed in there, and it's Minnesota, a team that's ahead of you in the wild card. So I don't think they have the horses in the stable They aren't getting their bullpen guys back. Their answer to all of this is calling up Rich Hill, 44-year-old Rich Hill. God love him, but that can't be your answer. And every move that Craig Breslow made around the trade deadline has fallen flat on its face. The two relievers, Danny Jansen gives you nothing except a little peek into MLB history by being the only player to play for the same team in the same two. Golly, can I talk today? He's the only player to play for both teams in the same game. You get a little bit of history there, but his career is history. It's done, okay? Both the relievers stink. Danny Jansen stinks, and James Paxton throws like 10 pitches in his whole Red Sox tenure this year, and he's out for the year. So you got to go out and get Rich Hill from Filing's basement. Oh, it's a sad state, man. And look, I'm trying to keep this into perspective, because if you had told me at the beginning of the season, hey, it's going to be like the end of August before they really bow out of this thing, I would have said you were crazy. I would have been stunned. I thought they were a last-place team. And maybe it's a last-place roster, but it's just disappointing the way this season was going and the things you had in place. You end up having to DFA Dom Smith, who was one of your most dependable players. I get why you had to do that, but that's looking like something you could use right now. And obviously, Casas is your everyday first baseman. I don't want to say Dom Smith should be playing over Casas, but you could use a bat like that in the lineup, which is weird to say. But I'm not crucifying the GM after one trade deadline, but there wasn't much he could do in the offseason. I thought he could have done more than he did. I don't know how much of that was ownership and how much of that was him, but he seemed to have a little bit more reign on this trade deadline, which was never going to be crazy, but he failed at that too. So really, we're 0 for 2 at his first, 2 windows of acquiring talent. One to make the team more than a last-place team, and one to make them a playoff contender. He's failed at both. And someone who is failing in the NFL is Bailey Zappi. Zappy hour. Just like happy hour in Massachusetts. Done. Over. Wave to it. Bye, Charlie. Bailey Zappi has been released by the New England Patriots today. Surprising, kind of, because I thought they would get a dance partner. I really did. I thought they would get a trade partner for Bailey Zappi when quarterbacks get hurt towards the end of camp. But to be quite honest, that's not something we've seen a lot of this year. Most years we see it, and who knows? Teams are going to their final cutdowns next week. It might be something where Zappi's on a practice squad until someone does get hurt week 1 for someone's team, and that could be the case. But Bailey Zappi has a spot in this league, probably not as a starter, of course, not as a starter, but he could be a somewhat dependable backup for you. I mean, he started probably almost the equivalent of a full season in the NFL, right? He's probably started 12, 14 games. So, you've seen some moments from him, but he's never going to be a dependable frontline starter in this league. So there was no way the Patriots were going to carry 4 quarterbacks, and it seemed highly unlikely that they would move Joe Milton, the guy who they just spent a draft pick on, albeit a 6th-round draft pick. But it was doubtful they were going to move on from him before they were going to move on from Bailey Zappi. And lest we forget, they cut Zappi last year. I think people forget that. They cut Zappi at this time, maybe the same day, last year. And nobody wanted him. So they went out and they just got him. They brought him back. And he ends up starting the last, 5 or 6 games of the season for you. But I will remember Bailey Zappi for 2 things. That touchdown drive against the Bears on Monday Night Football, when the fans practically booed Mac off the field in his first game back, and Zappi gave them a lifeline. That place was going nuts. Nuts! Ended up being an embarrassing loss to a team that was so bad that it was picking in the top 5, the Chicago Bears, and was kind of the beginning of the end of the Mac Jones era and this rebuild, this Belichick rebuild. That was kind of the beginning of the end of it. So I think of that, and then I think of the end of it, which is that game against the Colts in Germany last year that I was streaming at a brunch with my future in-laws. Mac throws like the worst pick I've ever seen ever, but almost not to be outdone. Bailey Zappi comes in. Bailey Zappi comes in for the game-winning 2-minute drill. It's 10-6. The game is still there within reach. And Zappi gets this 4th down conversion on a run play, rushes them up to the line. There's like 40 seconds left. He's calling clock, going to spike it. Fake spikes, throws into double coverage right in the middle of the field. Never had a chance. Game-winning pick for Indy. Like, just that throw never, ever had a chance. It's crazy that we saw that Mac pick earlier in the game in the end zone. That's one of the worst passes I've ever seen, and thought there's going to be a pass in this game that rivals this one. It's not as bad, but there is going to be another pass in this game that you're going to see that has just no fucking chance at all of being completed to your own team. And that's what I'll remember Bailey Zappi for, the beginning of the end of the rebuild and the end of the end of the rebuild. And we start over again. And it might be that pass, that pick, that terrible decision, plus a Chad Ryland missed field goal against the Giants that got them their quarterback of the future in Drake May, who I'm pretty high on, but you guys already knew that. Anyway, I'm a little bit higher on the Bruins after this talk with Matt Barry from the Bruins Benders podcast. He is going to give us the lowdown on why the Bruins got better this year, but why they might not be able to sign their franchise goaltender. Matt Barry coming up next on The Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Matt Barry from the Bruins Benders podcast joining us now, also writing for Inside the Rink, which is where I've been following a lot of this Jeremy Swayman news. And Matt, it has been a long summer of intrigue. The NHL I always find so interesting. NBA, it feels like that free agency buzz kind of goes for like a month. In the NHL, it's like 3 days. And then you're kind of done. And we're getting ready in a few weeks for training camp. So how's your summer been? Did you get to do the Bruins Fan Fest? I know they were up there in Lewiston.
I didn't. I did go to the Portland one.
Oh, gotcha.
A couple of years ago, I think it was at Hadlock. Met Matt Grzelcyk, met some people there. It's a great event. I wasn't able to get to Lewiston, but yeah, it's a great event for the fans, and they usually have a few. I saw in Lowell, I think it was, that Matt Poitras was there, and so it's really cool for fans to be able to get in touch with players. It has been This is always a long stretch. Right in August here is always a dead time when nothing really goes on. And you're right. The free agency comes in like a buzzsaw, and then all of a sudden it kind of dies off. And now you're just waiting for, rookie camp, and that should be in a couple of weeks, and then the actual training camp, and then it gets going. So right now, it's pretty dead, and that's why you get these Swayman things, and you get these rumors, and people are just bored and need some material.
And speaking of that, why don't we jump right in, because there is one free agent, restricted free agent for the Bruins still out there, and that is Jeremy Swayman. And it seemed like a slam dunk, especially after the Ullmark trade, that this was going to get done quickly. It is not. Maybe not cause for concern yet, but are you surprised that this deal hasn't gotten done yet as we sit in the last week of August here?
You know what? I'm not. And I've said this on the podcast before. Jeremy Swayman was more upset about the arbitration deal last year than people really want to give it credit for. I mean, he was irritated, and he was upset, and he didn't like that whole scenario. Now, it wasn't the Bruins' fault per se, in that they didn't have cap space to give him what he wanted, so they kind of had to kick the can down the road a little bit. But he took it as I didn't like that process, because in arbitration, when you get with a player in front of them, you're telling them all the things that they're bad at.
Yeah, tell
all
them why
the
they suck.
weaknesses they have to bring the value down. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about like being in marriage counseling, when you're bringing out all the dirty laundry. Like that's kind of what it is, and that was a problem for Swayman. So I thought that he'd play some hardball, and he has. And from what Rich Keefe said on the Jones and Keefe show on EEI yesterday, which really exploded, was that the rumor is that he's asking for 10 million a year, which is, Vasilevsky money,
Yeah.
which is Bobrovsky money, Carey Price money. It's way up there toward the top. So now where that number falls, Bruins can't do 10 million unless they move people around. They don't have that kind of cap space. I don't think they'll do 10 million, but this could go into training camp. There could be a holdout situation here for sure.
All right, so follow up 2 questions because you're referencing the one that's buzzed all around, the $10 million. So first question from me to you is, do you believe that? Do you see where he's asking to be one of the highest paid goalies in the league, or do you think that's something coming from the Bruins to maybe get the fan base on their side a little bit?
Well, that's the good point, is that people were mentioning that maybe, Sweeney and the management were kind of putting that out there to tell fans, hey, this is why we're not doing it. I think that Swayman, judging by his agent, who's had Johnny Gaudreau and other and William Nylander, other players who have held out before, and he advises players to hold out for the most money. So that's a tough negotiation. I do think that Swayman probably went high, probably went around there, whether it's 10 or whatever. It's certainly more than the Bruins are willing to give. So I can't see a scenario where he asked for 8 and it's taken this long. He must have asked for something higher, or they would have come to some sort of agreement, because I could see the Bruins giving him 8, but 10 is sort of out of the ballpark. So now I think that it would have to be something high for it not to be done by now. So I think there might be some truth to it. Whether it's 10, I don't know the exact number, but it's certainly on the high end.
That's a good point. We heard a lot of discourse over the summer of, well, Swayman's got to only be asking for 8 or 8.5, and I'll bet the Bruins are trying to get 7.75, and it was like that seemed just a little too low for today's negotiating tools. And so, follow-up question to you: we talked about the guys who are in that ballpark at that position getting that AAV. Is Jeremy Swayman worth $10 million a year?
No, and I don't think he is. I think he's probably worth more of the 7.5 to 8. There's a couple of factors here. One is that what the league has said is that the salary cap is going to go up pretty exponentially here, like high, like 20 million more than it is now. So I think that players and agents are forecasting that, and I think it's making negotiations a little stickier there. Like, Jeremy Swayman's never played a full season. He's played half seasons. He had a great playoff round against Toronto, and then he played very well against Florida. So there's some signs there. He was a Hobey Baker finalist. I mean, this guy just didn't come from nowhere. I mean, he's always been a good goalie at every level. So he's 25. I mean, there's a lot going for him there, and I certainly think he's very good. And I also like his chutzpah, kind of his makeup. Like, he showed some signs there where he had a lot of confidence, and he had kind of an edge to him that people I don't think had seen before. So I like the whole goalie makeup he has as well. So I would say 7.5 to 8 would be fair. But I don't think he's worth 10. He hasn't won a cup. He's won one playoff series. I don't think he's there yet. But if you're forecasting what he could be, and that's a big if, but if you're forecasting that, then he's certainly in the 8 range. I think 8 is fair.
And I will guarantee he is going to play more games than Carey Price is this year. So there you go.
Right.
I mean, unless this holdout goes the whole season, he's probably going to play more than Carey Price.
True.
And it's a good point about the salary cap, because that's something that has been brought up in the Zadorov and Lindholm deals, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I know another one that you've been talking about on the podcast for, a couple months now since it's happened, the Ullmark trade. We all knew this negotiation was going to be coming with Jeremy Swayman, and that it could be high. I think $10 million is taking a lot of people, off guard, but we knew it was going to be pretty good money for a goaltender in this negotiation. So, were you surprised to see the Bruins pull the trigger on a Linus Ullmark trade before the draft, knowing that these negotiations were coming and knowing that Swayman was irritated from last year?
Well, I thought they should have. I thought they should have moved him, but I was surprised at the return some. I was
Me too.
also surprised that they didn't really save a ton of money.
Yeah.
They brought in Corpusalo. They have a little bit of money in Castellic. Like they didn't save a ton of money there, a million and a half or so.
Yeah.
Like I thought if they would to trade him, they would trade him and get all that money. Trade him for prospects or draft picks and have all that money freed up. That would make more sense with the timing of it. So really, they didn't put themselves in any more position to give Swayman more money. So now, of course, in hindsight, it looks like they gave all the leverage to Swayman by
Yeah.
trading Allmark away. But you do have Corpusalo, who's a veteran goalie who hasn't been very good, but the Bruins have developed goalies and they've done a really good job of reclamation projects at goalie. Jaroslav Halak
Hmm.
and other goalies that they've done really well with. Bob Asenza is one of the best in the game at
Yeah.
coaching goaltenders. So, um, but I think that I was really kind of surprised at the return and that they didn't position themselves with a salary cap. Um, and now you can question the timing because now you kind of left it in Swayman's sort of court to determine what the price will be. And again, I just have this feeling that this is going to go into training camp, and if it does, then I'm really concerned about injuries because with
Mm.
goaltenders, you pull groins, you tweak backs, it's if you're not conditioned to play hockey for a bit and you hold out and then you're thrust into the position, it could really line up to have some nagging injuries
Mm.
because of it.
And the Bruins did do some free agent signings this summer. The Swayman's still on the shelf, but they did bring in some guys. Obviously, the first day of free agency, bringing in the two Canucks. The main ones, Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. Your thoughts on the way they went with free agency, how they were trying to bolster the team?
Well, I think first of all you have to look at what's available,
Hmm.
and Steven Stamkos wasn't coming here.
Not at that money.
There wasn't a ton beyond the top couple of guys, so it was kind of Elias Lindholm for that reason is a good player who's dipped some with his production, but when he has played with good players in Calgary, he was excellent.
Mm.
When he has not played with great players, just sort of, decent players, his production's gone down. So if you play him with David Pastrnak, there's no reason to think he's not going to put up some points. And he's a very good two-way center, and
Yeah.
they've likened him to Patrice Bergeron, and they like that type of center. Charlie Coyle's that type. Zaka's been that type. Just they like two-way, 200-foot game, defensive responsibility from the centers. That's what they like. So this is a good makeup in that way for them. Zadorov, they need some a-hole to
Yeah.
their defensive core. They need it. They need some nastiness. And they every time in the playoffs, the last time they won the cup, they had some nasty people. They had
Nasty bunch.
Ferentz and
Yeah.
McQuaid and guys would get in your face, and they didn't take any stuff from anybody. So that plays well in the playoffs, and the Bruins haven't really had that much recently. So they need someone like Sidorov to do that. Now, whether or not he's worth $6 million, I don't know. But again, with cap going up, maybe that
Yeah.
deal looks a little better later on. But they did need him, his type of player, big, strong, rugged, nasty. They need that on the back end for sure. So I liked their off season. I liked their free agent signings because I think it really filled a couple of needs. And judging from what was available, this is kind of the best that they could do.
Mm. And I'm a fan of Zadorov. I was a little red flags with how many organizations he's been in. I think that's
Mm.
also partially how the league is now with that kind of player. It's just
Hmm.
not valued, I think, as much as it used to be or as it should be. And one
Hmm.
of those guys who might not value that as much is Jim Montgomery. And I don't know that this was this is a Don Sweeney deal, or this is coming down from Cam Neely. We got to get a guy like this, but it has seemed that in the Jim Montgomery era of the two seasons here, both playoff series that they lost, both against the Panthers, they got bullied in those series, which is something that They never did under Claude Julien, and again, the league was a little different 10 years ago even. But did that feel like something to you where it was like, Jim, you find a spot for this guy, and we got to have some muscle here? You know, I look at a guy like Brandon Carlo, big frame, good defenseman, but doesn't throw the frame around a lot. You know, I saw something that the Bruins are now the heaviest team in the league, and it's like, well, it doesn't feel like that when I watch the games. So did you think that Zadorov was more of a, Monty, he's going to be on the roster, you find a time to play him in the top 4 defensive core?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought there was a little bit of a philosophical difference between Don Sweeney and Cam Neely.
Yeah.
I mean, Don Sweeney was a smallish defenseman who could skate really well and kind of a Matt Grzelcyk type of player in that realm anyway. You know, he played a long time. He was a little bit more rugged than Grzelcyk, but he could skate and he could move the puck. And Neely is a bang you through the boards guy. I mean, that's why his career was so short. I mean, that's what he did every single night. So there's been signs in the past, getting Nick Foligno, getting Zach Ronaldo, getting, every once in a while, I just feel like Neely gets a little pissed and is like, can we get a guy who can hit somebody? And I think that this is him finally getting into Don Sweeney's head that, now this is kind of where the league's going now, bigger, stronger. It went big, like late 90s or so. All these defensemen were huge. And then it went to puck movers, and the game changed, and the Bruins loved the puck moving thing. And now it's getting back to, I mean, their defensive core is all like 6'2" or better. Yeah. It's all 200 pounds or more. It's their defensive core. The 6 guys are pretty big now. Now, do they play that big? Does Brandon Carlo play that big? Does Mason Lowry play that big? Probably not, but Zadorov will. So I think that comes down from Neely. I really do. I think that Sweeney would have a bunch of guys skating around, passing the puck everywhere, and so would Montgomery. But I think that they've noticed now that it's just not going to work 100% in the playoffs if you don't have some guys with some heaviness and some ruggedness to their game.
Couple more for you. First off, you made me think of that one real quick in the middle of that answer there. Is Lowry your quarterback for the second power play? Is he over Hampus Lindholm?
I'd love to see it. Boy, I was first power play. I'd love to see it.
Right, sure.
The kid's just really talented offensively. And he showed that. I mean, he had that terrific goal in the playoffs, like short side snipe. Like, geez, he could really play offense. I mean, he was a forward, growing up as a kid and was moved to defense. So he has those natural abilities and instincts offensively. I just don't think it's in Charlie McAvoy's DNA. Like I think he does fine, but I just don't think he's a fluid offensive quarterback. That's why they played Kevin Shattenkirk. That's why they dressed Kevin Shattenkirk.
That's why he was on the bench
for 10 minutes. Because they needed him on the power play. If you have to dress Kevin Shattenkirk and only play him 10 minutes, then there's a problem. So I think, from the get-go, let's throw Lowry in there and see what you have. And I think I would put him on the first unit, and I think he could really help. That's the one thing that power play really, it got so heavily sort of reliant on David Pastrnak and his slot one-timer. It's just too easy to defend, and they need a good power play quarterback, and I think Lowry could be that guy.
And looking at what's left, I guess this all depends on the Swayman contract. So I had a different view of it a few days ago than I do now in terms of this bargain bin, who they could bring in for a PTO, any of these veteran forwards. Was there anyone there that stuck out to you? I mean, I'm seeing obviously Blake Wheeler, the kid Yamamoto, who used to play for Edmonton, now for Seattle, and even Max Pacioretty is still out there. Do any of those names do anything for you on a PTO, or even Van Riemsdyk again?
I've always liked Patches. I think Pacioretty was a really good player for a while. He's had tremendous injury problems, and he's getting toward the back end. Maybe take a flyer on him. Yamamoto is a former first rounder. He's still only 25 years old or something. He's still young, and maybe someone like him. They really have here's what needs to happen. They need to have either Georgi Merkulov or they need to have Fabian Lysell take that second line right wing
Just be an NHL
and
guy.
run with it.
Yeah.
They need that. They need it. They need to be. I mean, Merkulov has scored 30 goals at Providence now. There's really nothing more for him there. He has to take the step. Now, there's talk about him negotiating with Russia to maybe go back to go to the KHL, or nobody seems to really know when that is. If that's something later on, or if what he's positioning himself to do. He's 24 years old. Like, he's not a young rookie. So I don't know what's happening with Merkulov, but they really need him to step up, or they need Lysell to be the first round pick that they need. So one of those two guys needs to be a full-time NHL player, in my opinion. So these PTO guys, yeah, that's great. And they hit with Danton Heinen last year for sure.
Yeah.
But JVR is a veteran guy and not really getting a lot of looks. Blake Wheeler is really kind of toward the end. We saw that with the Rangers late last year. He's just toward the end. So yeah, I mean, those are good stopgap insurance guys. But at the end of the day, they need one of these young prospects to make a step this year and play full time in NHL.
So now, Matt, one last question for you. After all this that we've talked about today, are the Bruins better than they were last year?
I believe so. I mean, I think their defensive core is one of the top defensive cores in the league. I think they have good offensive puck moving ability. I think they have good players. I think they have now some rugged, play with Zadorov. I think that Peak and Wotherspoon are really good, serviceable role type players. I think they're pretty good there. Obviously, with Swayman in the mix, they have excellent goaltending. And then, they're with Lindholm and Zaka and Coyle, they're steady. I mean, are they good enough to at the center position to be a Stanley Cup contender? I don't know, but I think that they're better. And here's the other thing: I think that Florida's not as good on paper. They lost some people there. Toronto's always kind of a mess, always kind of a wild card. Who knows what's happening with Marner? What's happening with Tavares? Who knows? There are some better teams like Buffalo and Detroit got better. But I think for the most part, I mean, if you're looking at Tampa Bay, I don't think is as good. They're hitting an aging core right now. I think that Boston can really, if they stay healthy, things go right, and Swayman signs early enough. I think that they and their young guys like Lohrei and Patra and those guys perform pretty well. I think they can win the division. I think they can. I think they are better than they were last year.
And maybe for better or for worse, Montreal might be a little bit better this year, which could be
sure.
good,
I mean, that's
get
Line A. If someone could figure out Line A,
yeah,
I mean, he's so talented.
The talent is still there. We just gotta get it together. We just gotta get it together.
I mean, he's very talented, and they have some good young players. Like, they're close. They're probably not there quite yet, but they're pretty close. Maybe next year, the year after, they'll be a team to be reckoned with, and hopefully that rivalry comes back.
Yeah, let's get that going again. It's been a while, man. It's been a decade since they played in the playoffs. And I mean, Dougie Hamilton was scoring in that.
I grew up with that rivalry, like the hatred, the whole thing, the forum, the whole thing.
That's what was so great.
I grew up with.
That's what was so great about like my time growing up as a Bruins fan for our generation was, I mean, they won the Cup too when I was 13, so that was great. But it was that rivalry being reborn again. The Celtics and Lakers was coming back, and Montreal Boston was always boiling when I was a kid.
That was it.
I need that back. I need that back. Matt, how can the people follow your work and tell us about the podcast, where they can find it?
Sure. With the Bruins Benders podcast, we're on YouTube or on all the podcast platforms. We're through the Inside the Rink network. So if you go to Inside the Rink's YouTube channel, you can subscribe there. This year we'll do post games, we'll do pre games, we'll do weekly episodes. It's really growing. We have a great following. You can actually check us out on X. We're at Bruins Benders. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere. So we'll cover everything Bruins all year long. So check us out. Me and Smitty, this will be our 4th season doing Bruins Benders. So check it out, interact with us. We'll do post games live, so you can interact with us in the comment section. We have a lot of fun with it. So
Matt Barry, Bruins Benders podcast. Matt, thanks so much for the time. We got to have you on again soon.
Absolutely, Cam. I love the show. You do a great job. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm putting sports aside for a second here on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network, because this morning I woke up to some of the greatest news I've ever gotten in my life. Like, truly, this day I will always remember. I have a shit car situation going right now. I got to buy a new car. I'm in football season. There's all kind of stress in my life. But today, this morning, I woke up, actually it was in the middle of the night, and I knew that the announcement was already going to be there, but was just needed to know that it was actually true. And I'm still pinching myself. I have been all morning wondering if this is real life. But everything points to it being so. Oasis, my favorite band of all time, the band that means more to me than most people do in my life. Most things, most people, even some family members. They're back. They are back together. And they are touring in 2025. It's like the greatest thing ever. It's like, I still, as I'm saying this out loud, it doesn't feel real. The Gallagher brothers have put aside the differences, and they are going to go on tour. Now, it's not until the summer. So, look, a lot of time, next summer, I should say, because we're still in the summer. So there's a lot of time for the Gallagher brothers to piss each other off again. But I've waited for this for so long, man. So long. The best band since the Beatles, and one that never got its due in the United States, is coming back, and they are going to save music again. This is, I mean, I'm not one for these nostalgia reunion tours for the most part, because I think guys do it when they need money and they're way past their prime. Neither of these guys from Oasis really need the money. They've had pretty successful solo careers in Europe and the UK. I've really liked Liam's solo stuff. And they are past their prime, but they're not like wheeling out Guns N' Roses out there or the Rolling Stones to this point. They've got something left. They can still rock a show. They've still, the two of them have been touring all of Europe and around the world. So they can still do this. And the prospect of being able to go to an actual Oasis show is like the most exciting news I've ever gotten. Now, do I have the money to go to the UK to catch them in 2025 in the summer? No, I don't. Will that stop me? Maybe. But there's also rumors that they're coming to the U.S., and we've seen some of the tour dates for that, including a show at my hometown Gillette Stadium. Well, kind of hometown, an hour away. My hometown football team stadium at Gillette next Labor Day weekend. And I would do anything to get in there. But the people, and this is going to sound very old man, get off my lawn, I know more music than you, but they're just criminally underrated here in the States. They really are. They were massive in the UK and really everywhere around the world, except for, the US and Canada. Massive deal. Like the biggest band of the 90s if you go to any other country. They might say Nirvana, but a lot of them are going to say Oasis. Just took over in the mid to late 90s. In fact, this Friday, the 30th, is going to be the 30th anniversary of their debut album coming out and taking the world by storm. And here in the U.S., they're known for Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova, and maybe some, the odd music fan might know Live Forever or Don't Look Back in Anger, which is my favorite Oasis song. But on the whole, they don't they don't know too much about them. In fact, it's gotten to be a meme, right? We all know that one douchebag who knows how to play a little bit of guitar, and they're like, oh, here's Wonderwall. And that really sucks because while that is a very simple song, it's a great song. It really is a masterpiece. And now it's just become this meme over time, whereas they should be respected for what they were, which was at the time the greatest rock band in the world in the mid to late 90s. And this is like the classic. I don't even know if Cain and Abel is the right story, but anyone who has a brother that just knows how to get on your nerves at any time of day, no matter what you're doing, that was Oasis to the extreme. The two brothers, Noel and Liam, they have hated each other the last 15 years, or at least shown it because they don't talk to each other. We don't even know that they've talked between the end of the band in August of 2009 to whatever, a couple weeks ago probably, to get this thing set up. But there was rumors of it for years, and it was downplayed for years. And even this week they said, hey, Oasis is making an announcement on August 27th, and everyone thought, oh, it's going to be some re-release, some 30th anniversary. But the signs were there. There was Liam Gallagher does not know how to censor himself. On Twitter, people were asking, when are you going to be in Chicago? And he said, next year. And he said something like, I never liked the term former. And it just all felt like it was coming together. Noel, in his own way, planted some Easter eggs just by giving Liam some compliments over the last few weeks. And it is happening. It is finally fucking happening. Oasis is back. And I'm telling you, they're going to put on a great tour. And I actually wish they would release some new music. We don't know if that's going to happen. But, like, I could see them. Liam still got it in his voice. And I wasn't a huge fan of High Flying Birds, to be honest with you. But there's some good songwriting still there from Noel. Like, every once in a while, I'm like, oh, that's a good tune that they put out. But I really did not think I was going to see this. And I think most people around the world and music fans did not think they were going to see this. But those who said they're too good to not get back together, they were right. They're the ones taking the victory laps today. And those of us who have waited a decade for this, some of us 15 years, not me, but some 15 years since they broke up, have been waiting for this. It's coming together. And you bet your ass I will be there with the 50-year-olds that have held on to the Liam Gallagher haircut, who are going to wear the ponchos in August, who are still wearing the classic Adidas trainers. I'm going to be there with them, especially if they come to the U.S. Right now, it's just the U.K. and Ireland. Most of it's in Heaton Park in Manchester and Wembley Stadium. This feels like can't miss stuff. This feels like, for a generation, one of the great reunions ever. Like we never got to see it with the Beatles. We never got to see it with the Doors. We're never going to get to see it with the Cranberries because Dolores is no longer with us. There's so many of my favorite musical acts that I can't go and see. And I put Oasis right up there with all the ones who had dead band members. Like, that's how dire it seemed that they would get back together. And now it is happening. I'm telling you, I've always said this. Look, music is the most subjective thing. I wish I could be a music snob, but it's tough because it's so subjective. You either like it or you don't. But I think most people have a band or an artist or an album even that transcends everything for them. It means more to them than most things in their life. It is a part of them. It is more than just music. And for me, that is Oasis. And that's coming back. They're not dead. They're going to get back together. I'm still at a loss for words. I've just been rambling for frickin' 15 minutes now. I don't even know what to say. It's just, it means that much to me and to so many other people. And if you haven't checked out Oasis, now is the time. listen to all their music. That's first and foremost. Check out the documentary that came out in 2016, roughly, Oasis Supersonic. It is a brilliant documentary, and I'm not, hand to God, that's not just because they're my favorite band. It is a dynamite documentary about their rise, and they always kind of put themselves as like the last great band cultural phenomenon before social media and kind of the rise of that world. You hear a lot about it in the documentary about their Nebworth show, which is like their Woodstock. 250,000 people went to see them. 4% of the British population applied for tickets to go to these shows at Nebworth in 1996 at the peak of their powers. And Noel Gallagher describes it as like the last great coming together of people in Britain anyway before the social media world, which we know has changed it all in terms of, you know, these great get-togethers, these great moments in history. Oasis felt like the last kind of cultural curtain to fall before that came through. And I am so excited to possibly be part of the rebirth of that, of Oasis anyway. We're never getting rid of social media. But this guy is real excited and needs to get a new shirt. This one's a little tight. You can't really tell because it's black, but it's a little tight. I might need to get a new Oasis shirt and be down there in the pits with the guys with the Liam Gallagher haircuts and the ponchos in August. I can't freaking wait. Be sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me at RealCamStewart on Twitter. Send us a voicemail if you want to get your thoughts in on the show about Boston sports or Oasis. The number is in the description on YouTube. Be sure to find us there. Leave a voicemail. Anything, man. I don't give a shit what you say. We might play it on here. But thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow on The Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network.
We are Rogue Media Sports.